Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the Come to Your Senses podcast. I'm your host, award-winning certified feminine embodiment coach, licensed esthetician, and enthusiastic foster dog mama to animals across the land, Mary Lofgren. Here, we explore how to bring more richness, radiance, peace, and pleasure to our lives, homes, and hearts through the joy of beauty, the wisdom of the body, the warmth of connection, and the splendor of the senses. I'm so glad you're here. Pull up a poof and let's dive in. Hello, beautiful beings, and welcome to the velvet chaise of Come to Your Senses. Today, we have a very special Come to Your Senses conversation with one of my personal muses and mentors, the acclaimed author, artist, performer, historian, comedian, I would call her, Jo Weldon. So Jo is the founder of the New York School of Burlesque, among many other creative accomplishments. And I first met Jo over 20 years ago in a dusty Times Square rehearsal studio on a winter's eve in New York City. And she changed my life completely by teaching me the art of fan dancing. And little old me, who had never even had the confidence to wear short sleeves in public, metamorphosized under her tutelage and with big white ostrich feather fans by my side and soaring around my body, I felt like sensual greatness embodied, and I was sensual greatness embodied under Jo's leadership. And so suffice to say, this woman has changed my life, my career path, the way I see myself, and I am certainly not alone in that. She has changed the lives of thousands of people. And so without further ado, it is my honor, my pleasure, and my joy to introduce Jo Weldon. Wow, I'm so honored to be here with you. I was reflecting this morning on I was like a little nervous because I want to sound smart, you know? Because it's something I just so deeply respect about you is like your real scholarly investment in the history of striptease and in that intersection of culture and fashion and eroticism. And what I was writing in my journal was that 25-year-old who first met Jo in a Times Square studio when you gave me my first fan dance lesson, like just let her ask the questions. So I'm very, very grateful for your presence today.
I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. And so when we were talking about intentions, you know, you said one of your intentions for this time together is to help people have an easier time being in a difficult world. And I love starting there because the many branches of your work have shown me like it's been like a prism of light in the darkness. And when I encounter burlesque or striptease or, you know, Burlesque Hall of Fame or read one of your Substacks, it's like, oh, there it is. There's the life force. There's aliveness. And, you know, this is kind of a broad question, but I wonder if you might speak about just what moves you and has moved you throughout this extensive career in stripping and all of its various manifestations.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a kid, I was drawn to the sexier side of glamour. And I was thinking not too long ago about how I found these magazines in our basement and everybody, you know, when I say that, they're imagining Playboy or something like that, but I'm talking about Life magazine. And so Yeah, I mean, I was inspired by more erotic imagery than that, but Life magazine was full of stories of like real strippers and sex workers and movie characters of strippers and sex workers and sex strippers are sex workers, but I'm, you know, just broadening that umbrella so that a lot of things fit under it. And that was glamour to me. And then when I got a little older, I grew up in the 60s, and the 60s they were wild. They were so tumultuous and violent and passionate and political. And there was also all this really colorful art and fashion and TV shows. And it's almost as if like you'd watch the news and, and then you'd watch the Avengers or, see Catwoman, Batman or something like that. And I don't think I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that there's a healing element to glamour, and there's a healing element to a hint of the erotic. Sometimes there's a healing glamour to full-on eroticism, but sometimes it's, more subtle than that. And I think, a lot of times people mistake glamour for a simple appeal, to try to be attractive, but it's bigger than that. It's a reflection of the light that shines on us. For instance, if you're wearing rhinestones, and it doesn't have to be something sparkly, it could be a bath towel, but there's an element of sparkle and glow to the person you're observing or to the event you're observing that feels like just the healing quality of light. And so when I think about glamour, which actually means, to mask, a glamour is a mask, a glamour is a spell. I think about masks that reflect light, and also about a saying that I cannot remember where it comes from, but I heard it from Bette Midler, which is that the masks that we choose reveal more about our inner lives than our bare faces.
Mm.
And there's an element of what we choose to show or what we think of as a disguise in the glamour we choose that is very ultimately revealing, that tells a story.
Mm.
So between the reflection of light and the storytelling and the movement that goes along with it, the implied movement of a party or a dance or something that sparkles, there's a sense of healing. There's a sense of being able to see the light, to feel the movement for me. And I think that a lot of people who are drawn to burlesque or other forms of dance that involve an element of sensuality, I mean, they all do, but you know what I mean. Some more. And to costumes and to the sensual fabrics and everything, are looking for that healing element. The element that helps us, I don't know, live through just watching the news, or seeing the news in some cases,
Yeah. 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 It reminds me of during the Great Depression, how I was reading in some history book about how big a role burlesque clubs played in alleviating the despair for, people of all genders. Like, it wasn't just men going to see women, but that it was like a family affair to go and receive the healing of that reverie and just that remembrance that there's more to life than this moment.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't entertainment for children, but it was definitely that sense of being in a theater with the lights and the music and the sparkle and the movement and the bodies and everything. I think that's true. And also, I just bought this piece of outsider art, and this artist will not be known to anybody unless they've heard me or the gallery talk about them. But her name is Virginia Ahrens, Ahrens. And she did these drawings in the 30s. So, she was like a teenager at the beginning of the 30s and the beginning of the Depression. And she had these beautiful drawings of very erotic costumes on very beautiful women that looked like burlesque stars and Ziegfeld Folly stars and, fashion, like Jean Harlow type bodies and makeup and just really beautiful. And they're very sexy. They're very body conscious. Like they look like some of the things you would have seen, some of the more revealing things you would have seen at the Met Gala in the past couple of years. And this was her fantasy life. Her family didn't know about it. She never showed them to anybody. And I discovered these in this gallery downtown. And when they told me this story, I thought about how glamour was what got her through that time.
Mm.
And her visions of these erotic presentations, these erotic performances in fashion. And they're really stunning. And it's not that she was a great artist, although she definitely had some skill. Like she had kind of like a fashion illustrator's level of skill because she's very young, right? But she hid these in sheet music. Nobody ever saw them. And 20 years later, her family was like, we need to share these. So I've got one of them. And, there's definitely references to sex work because there's text on them, little writings about what they mean, and some of the names of some of the images. And I think this inner life that she had to hide was very painful for her. The story of her life was ultimately painful. And at that same exhibition, they had a painting by a man who had also hidden his art from his family all his life. And he did paintings of himself in what would have been thought of as women's clothing in different decades, going back through the Victorian era.
Mm.
And that made me think, so this was quite a journey for me about clients that I saw as a dominatrix that were trying to express, what you would call their feminine side and wanted to be dressed up as women and have erotic experiences as women, and how intense their longing was and how deep this need was and how it made them feel submissive, and how they would come in, vibrating with this energy, sometimes excitement, sometimes fear, and then leave relaxed. And that was their glamour, And because so many harsh things happen in the world, I think we forget how painful these secrets can be for people. So I took this journey from this, young woman doing these drawings. I felt almost as if she was having the same experience of hiding herself as these men, and have been really, really grateful that I've been able to express that side of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Express, my female drag, occasionally male drag, my expression of what I think of as energetic and beautiful, what I want to give to viewers, to audiences, to students. I really see it in this art. I see it being repressed. And I realize I'm spinning a story out of it. But when you look at it, you'll see it.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at it. And it's online. I put it on my Substack, a little bit about her.
Yeah. Jo has an amazing Substack called A Horticulture.
I am a horticulture.
And it's like my personal Sunday Times. You just write about the most interesting, evocative things. And I really loved your post last week about Camille 2000's final performance.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I just wept during that video. And to me, that was such an expression of like showing our light, which isn't always this bright, shiny rhinestone. Like sometimes it's the middle finger and flipping up an audience.
Absolutely. She wasn't flipping off the audience. She was flipping off cancer.
Yeah.
She had on the back of her wheelchair, she had this big painting of a bunch of hands giving the middle finger. And on the back, it said, fuck cancer.
Yeah.
But she did pass. So I think her journey is so interesting because you see pictures of her when she's young and she's like this kind of rock and roll which a lot of the legends were, like rock and roll women of the 50s and 60s,
Mm.
in these amazing outfits. And then in the like late 70s and early 80s, she really moves into that fetish, hardcore
Mhm.
rock and roll, motorcycle vibe. And then for her final performance, which she knew that it was,
Mhm.
she decided to go with this very ethereal, angelic portrayal of her inner life. And I think that was really, it was really important to me to see her resolve it that way because she was so scared.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And you are, I think I've heard you describe yourself as this, but I would certainly describe you as this, as a burlesque historian.
I am. I'm not the kind of historian who knows every date and, what city all these things happened in, but I do have a cultural sense of burlesque and I do know a good bit about many, many figures in burlesque.
Yeah. And what is important to you about keeping that history alive? Like why does that move you so much?
Because, well, it's interesting. Right now, strippers are able to talk on TikTok and the sex workers' rights movement is having different reception in the press than it's ever had. But it hasn't been like that for very long at all. Not at all.
Mhm.
And I remember as a kid seeing these images of, the women I'm talking about but they were like on napkins and, cartoons and stuff like that. And they
Mm.
were kind of nameless. So most of them had been famous like 10 years before I saw these images, and then nobody knew their names. And you would just see this. And I was in awe of their boldness and their art and their glamour and their, knowing how incredibly oppressed women were at that time and seeing them make this glamour out of adversity. I think I saw something really aspirational in terms of being a survivor. Like, they didn't, most of them, almost none of them got rich. They found a way to be in the world and they found a world to be in. And I could see that in those images. And so, when I went to work in strip joints, it was because I had run out of a lot of other options and the remaining options were extremely unappealing.
Mm.
And it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened for me because even though I would never, ever describe the adult entertainment industry as a safe place, it was a safe place for the part of me that made me both physically and socially endangered everywhere else.
Mm.
Being queer, being outwardly sexual, just all of those things that were getting me into physical trouble elsewhere. But I would never say that a strip joint is a completely non-homophobic or non-sexist environment, but so was high school, and I couldn't be myself there safely. In the strip joint, I had degrees of safety to be who I was that I didn't have anywhere else. And I think I was relating to my elders and I wanted to know their history. And in particular, there were like a few costume ladies that came in to sell us costumes. Like they would travel around from club to club in the dressing room selling us stuff because, there was no Fashion Nova, there was no Yandy, there were actually no pleasers, right? Pleasers. And they would come and sell us these things. And some of them were burlesque performers, 10 or 15 years before. One of them was a Las Vegas showgirl. And so they had a lot of character. They were really dazzling. A lot of them did not like us because they didn't like the whole spandex and recorded music thing, but
Mm.
they had great stories. I just put up with them having contempt for me because I love their stories so much. I was like, yeah, it doesn't matter what you think of me. Give me the juice. Give me the
Yeah.
story. And so I've always pursued that history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to connect to them when I very first met Dixie Evans at the Burlesque Hall of Fame. I couldn't believe I was meeting a burlesque star from the 1950s. I couldn't believe
Mm-hmm.
it. And then I met Jenny Lee, or I didn't meet Jenny Lee. I heard about Jenny Lee from Dixie because Jenny Lee started that whole museum and that whole reunion. That's now one of the centers of part of the, it's a center of a part of the burlesque world, right? So, Jenny Lee was an activist and a nudist, and, she protested, she formed a union, or tried to form a union that it became a league, because I don't think they were formally unionized. And they started their own museum.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we're not going to wait for other people to honor and appreciate us. We're going to tell them we're an important part of your culture. We're an important influence. We're all up in your art and politics, and we're going to let you know.
Mm-hmm.
They did it.
Yeah.
They were trying to they had a striptease school. They were trying to build a retirement center, which it's always on the table, but it hasn't happened yet, because that's a big project.
Wow.
Yeah.
God, that's amazing.
I know. I keep thinking we're upstate. I was like, there's all these big old places upstate.
Right.
People want to retire maybe to New York,
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be the one that does that, but I do love the idea.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just watched this movie. It was a Maggie Smith movie, and it was about a retirement home for musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a cheesy little romantic comedy, but I was like, God, I want to retire there.
Yeah.
Have opera salons every single night.
Oh my God, we'd be stripping for each other all the time, right?
Oh my God. I mean, that makes me really look forward to retirement. And I'll edit this part out, so no pressure, but are you okay to talk about sobriety? I'm sober as well.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I know that you're sober and you have long-term sobriety. And how do you feel like sobriety has impacted your career, your creativity? Because I think, when I started doing burlesque, I was drinking a lot. And I wouldn't ever go on stage drunk, but it was such a part of the culture for me to be at the slipper room and, have a drink and be backstage and whatever. And it was just so delicious. And when I got sober, there was a part of me that was like, oh God, am I going to lose access to that part of myself that could be on stage and that, loves glamour and sensuality? And, it's been my experience that I have greater access to that side of myself. But I'm curious, just anything that you feel moved to share about your own journey with that.
I feel like I do have greater access, but I definitely went through a period where I thought I wasn't fun anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized people weren't having fun around me when I was drinking.
Yeah.
Because I was a monster drunk. I associated drinking with glamour, and I think that by design of the liquor companies, but also it does soften the edges, and I had some edges to soften.
Mm.
But once I got on the other side of softening my edges, once I got drunker than that, I became the edge. Other people needed to get away from me. I was really bad. I was really violent and bad. And upset. And I had some trauma I was working through that we don't really have time to get into it. But one of the good things about it is that I was working in bars, so my alcoholism was accelerated.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to quit drinking on the early side. I hit bottom on the early side. And also, I will say the first time I quit drinking, I didn't have anybody saying, oh, gee, I never thought you had a problem. Like everybody's like, this is overdue. Maybe one person that I used to do cocaine with was like, oh, you used to be more fun. And oh my God, that's really a horrible thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
I love you, but that's a terrible thing to say. But I think overall, at first, okay, I'm going to get graphic. I used to like to get drunk and get laid. I loved it. I loved it. I love that abandon. And there's a certain level of I could tolerate more roughness, which I loved visually, and sort of the story that I would tell in my mind. I loved to be rough, to be treated roughly, not to be abused. Everything was negotiated and talked about, but loved it. And then when I stopped drinking, I had really come into my sexual self drunk, and I had to retrain myself sexually. And it took a little while. But then I started having the best orgasms of my life. Yeah. I was like, oh my God, I've been missing out. So that was interesting. And then as far as like being glamorous and having fun, no matter what liquid the ice is in, it sparkles. It doesn't matter. I do tell people I would like a cocktail glass, please.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the current wave of mocktails.
Me too.
Yeah.
God, they've really come a long way.
Yeah. And I used to bartend sober, which was really fun.
Yeah.
But I don't have the physical stamina now to be a bartender,
Mm-hmm.
but I wrote a book of cocktail recipes as a fundraising reward for my friend Cora Harrington, the lingerie addict. And I included a whole panel of mocktails. That was really fun. And she had it illustrated. It was really cool.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was fun.
I remember once seeing world famous Bob celebrate their sobriety birthday on Instagram and said, and this was when I was very newly sober, they said in their Instagram post, this is I think it was something like 20-year sobriety birthday. And I always thought I wouldn't be fun anymore, but I think sobriety is the most punk rock thing a person can do. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was so inspiring. Like, yeah. And this isn't a sobriety podcast, but it is kind of a spirituality podcast. And for me, the process of my journey in burlesque and the erotic has been a spiritual journey. And I feel like that deepening into authenticity for myself in sobriety and deepening into like claiming my powers of glamour and joy and like extroversion, because I grew up so wildly Catholic, and there's a lot of glamour in Catholicism.
Oh, yeah.
Now that I reflect on it, like that side really drew me in. But one of the things that was so healing about burlesque for me was I remember the first show I ever saw was at the Slipper Room. I think it was even one of your student showcases.
Could have been.
And I felt like I was at some kind of holy temple that was like the lost city of Atlantis, where bodies were revered and where things like thigh jiggle or, breasts that are like too small, quote unquote, according to the culture, or too big, according to the culture, like the full spectrum of the human body wasn't just not hidden, but it was like celebrated with glitter and sequins. And kind of forget why I started talking about this. Oh, yes. But like for me, I could not even wear short sleeves in the summer. I remember one time walking through the city and it was like nearly 100 degrees and I was wearing a cardigan sweater over a tank top. And I just couldn't take off my sweater. Like I felt like if I did, like the world would crumble. And finally I reached a breaking point, thinking that it would be like a Hindenburg kind of running away, if I showed my body. And like, I just remember being shocked that like nothing happened and nobody even looked my way and nobody even cared, And so I wonder, because I imagine there are folks who listen to this podcast who might feel like they have this spark in them of wanting to be on the burlesque stage, or even wanting, like for me, even going to a burlesque show was a huge risk, like took a lot of courage for me at that time. And I remember I used to go to Fantasy World all the time on Greenwich after I started performing, and just felt like I was suddenly in Disney World of this whole world that I thought I would never, ever be able to access because I could not even cross that threshold of that shop.
That was the most amazing store.
Oh, so good.
It's so good.
The outfits I got in those little plastic wrappers.
I love those. I have a whole thing about celebrating like the, Leg Avenue vinyl teddy in a bag. I was like, we really need to celebrate those things, not be snobby about them. Like, not just as a gateway drug to something more sophisticated, but for that moment of joy.
Yeah.
Joy is more important than anything else. It is not that easy to come by.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, I
Well,
say I have a joyous life, but I
yeah.
did not.
And I wonder if a person is feeling that spark of desire, but also feeling a wall of obstacle of like, that's not for me, or that's, whatever labels the culture puts on it. Like, is there anything that you might say to that person to encourage them to explore? Like, what might be a starting step or a starting word?
Well, I think it starts a lot with, we have resources right now that are really amazing. And I think I always encourage people who are like, oh, I can't do burlesque. I'm too shy. I'm too old. I'm too big. I'm too this. I'm too that. And, I keep encouraging people to, in the burlesque handbook, I talk about Flickr, but now we have, Instagram and TikTok. And I think you can follow people who look like you that are doing what you want, because the tendency is like, oh, I'll follow the person who, if they must be doing it right because they're unattainable. I'm like, well, what if the right way to do it, there's also a right way to do it that's attainable,
Mm,
right?
mm,
What if there's more than one right way? What if the right way isn't what you're thinking is the hardest or the most unlike what you are? Like I'm in my 60s, right? I'm kind of hitting my peak glamour, I think, even though I wear more sneakers than I ever have in my life because the feet have gone. But, so I follow a lot of older glamorous people because I intend to, lean into being an older glamorous person. If I wanted to lean into being an older farm person, I would follow farm people, right? But when I see people who are successful at it and I see the support that they get in comments and things like that, it doesn't have to be somebody with 1 million followers. It could be somebody with like 20 followers, right? And then remember this. So you will see negative comments, which interestingly is nothing compared to the number of negative comments you will see on a Kardashian post, but right. But we have a tendency to think that any insult we've ever gotten or any insult we see someone get from somebody is the most likely to be true, right? If it's harsh, it must be true. If you're afraid of it and it happens, it must be true. Like what's unpleasant is necessarily deeper, which is not true. But we all remember insults more than compliments. And the reason for that is not because we're neurotic and not because society is out to get us, but because we have this vestigial adrenaline rush. You know what I'm saying? That was the best way to phrase it. But we have this physical reaction in our bodies to someone that we perceive as a danger.
mm,
Someone who says, oh my God, you're way too old to wear that. They're not on your side. They will probably say as many bad things as they can, right? They're not for you. You have to remember who that person is. But instead, you remember the comment.
mm-hmm.
That's just your body looking out for you. And sometimes you just have to say, body, thank you for alerting me to how very much that person is not on my side. I would like to now seek the people that are. Look for the people who are for you, not against you. And that is the answer. Look for the people who are for you, not against you. Because what are you afraid of? You're afraid of how you'll be perceived. There are people out there dying to see you do the thing you want to do.
Mm,
Your audience is hungering for you right now. And it may be an audience of two of your friends talking about it at lunch. It doesn't have to be an audience in a nightclub or theater. It doesn't have to be anything. It just has to be you living that part of yourself to the fullest. And there's a saying about and it's an saying I learned in AA about hanging on to your fears and hanging on to things you think you need to do and hanging on to anger. And it's like, let go or be dragged.
mm-hmm.
Figure out whatever that fear is and let go of it or be dragged by it. Like it's keeping you back.
I remember a friend who I was really encouraging to wear hats. I feel like this happens a lot. with my friends where I just love wearing hats. Like to me, it takes the most yoga pants centric outfit and turns it into like instant glamour fest, But a friend was like, oh no, I can't like it, and I appreciate how you're saying like it could be an audience of two and it doesn't have to be getting on stage, to Egyptian fantasy. Like it could be as simple as wearing a hat to the golf club, which
you could be your own audience. You can look in the mirror and love yourself and, get recordings of applause and then, walk out into your living room to applause. Like just, it's all, nothing is real,
That reminds me of what I think was my very first pebble on my own journey of self-love and sensuality, which was this VHS tape called The Art of Exotic Dancing for Everyday Women. Do you remember that?
Yep, I do.
And there was an exercise where you walk to yourself in the mirror holding eye contact, and then you walk back, like with your back to the wall, you walk backwards. And it was the first time in my life I ever looked at my reflection with something other than disdain.
Mm-hmm.
And it just sparked that memory when you were talking about, an audience of one.
And I have to say, like, when I'm teaching tassel twirling, it's the one time we get topless in the classes, because most people are like, I want to learn, and then we'll see about getting naked, right? And when I show people that they can twirl tassels and I see them, they're looking at themselves in the mirror, mostly naked, and smiling and laughing and experiencing joy as they meet their own eyes in the mirror while this is happening. And that's, when you talk about whether or not something is empowering, it's like, have you ever done that before? You may not be breaking the glass ceiling. You may not be getting the government to pay for childcare, but you're allowing yourself to live more fully in a world that threatens you about that a lot. And I think that walking toward the mirror, holding eye contact with yourself, just looking at yourself and allowing yourself to feel pleasure when you do is incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
Flirt with yourself.
Yeah. And the word boldness, like you used that word earlier, and I love that word. And that is such a thread that I feel like weaves through burlesque, striptease, like all these intersections. And you are wearing, is it leopard?
It is a form of leopard. It's kind of a fantasy leopard print.
Okay. I am wearing, is this snow leopard?
That is kind of snow leopard. Yeah. Most of these are stylized, but yes, I would call that snow leopard.
Yes. So Joe wrote an entire book on the history of leopard print and big cat prints in fashion as a symbol, well, just in general, but also as a symbol of power and feminine dominance and expression. And it's one of the memories I feel like on my deathbed I will be so proud of is that I was living in Nashville at the time and I flew to New York just to go to your book signing.
Yeah, that was amazing.
I bought this little little leopard velvet fascinator, and that show was so great. And it was just one of those adventures where it's like, this was an investment in my joy, Yeah. And I love just like, the niche aspect that you have teased out of fashion. And I wonder, if you might just give a little quip on big cat prints.
Sure.
And yeah.
So the book is called Fierce, The History of Leopard Print. And of course, every history is a history. There is no the history. But I'm really looking at the influence in the fashion system that most of us are in now. So how did leopard print become a thing there? And I realized that a lot of people were identifying with the power of the animal and it's not just a cultural reference, it's a natural reference. And there's in my opinion, it's that people aren't saying that they're a predator, but they're saying they're not prey.
Mm.
They're claiming their space. And leopards are really amazing creatures. You know, they're associated with like Dionysus, and that has to do with they're nocturnal and people have their parties and sexy times at night, but also an incredibly strong animal, really powerful, and a very versatile animal that lives in all these different environments and survives all these incredible odds and is one of the most beautiful, glamorous. They're considered a charismatic animal by zoos. They're, cheetahs and leopards attract people. And so I think that people are really identifying with that natural aspect. And there's a lot of prints that you could wear that identify with nature. Florals have power. Zebra print has power, but that's not a predator. It's not an apex animal. But everything has its own power. But leopard print is one of the few things that you can see a person wearing, and it's almost like they're wearing their own familiar.
Mm.
They're assuming or aspiring to the characteristics of one of the most powerful, adaptable, and revered animals in the entire animal kingdom. I call them the original influencer.
Yeah. And what is, when I think of leopard print, I usually associate that with a woman who isn't afraid to express some aspect of her being a sexual being.
That is really common. And I think that's because of the connection to nature, because it's actually like the animal is not clothed, it's naked. So in a way, it's a state of nudity, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it has a lot to do with two things. One is that nocturnal aspect, which is erotic, and the erotic is often embodied as female in our culture. If you were to talk to the ancient Greeks, you might have a different. But even they had the leopard in their eroticism. And I think there's also because I think cats kind of became associated with women as they became domesticated, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole history of cats being worshipped and everything, but I'm just going to talk about this European concept of the domesticated cat, which was associated with the kitchen, where they kept them to get the mice. So when you see the crone, the witch, she's got the domestic cat, the cauldron, in which she's supposed to provide food for the family, and the broom, she's supposed to be maintaining cleanliness and order, and using those to create chaos and order and bend things to her will, right? But cats, I think that's where cats might have come to be more associated with the feminine, because all leopards, every gender have the same pattern on them. There's a bunch of different kinds of leopards, but you know what I mean, within a species. And I think that association and the European tendency to associate the erotic with the feminine, the modern European, I should say, is a part of why leopard print came to have that association. I think it's sort of coming out of that. I think it's becoming a little more mainstream. And I talk about this one group of women in Japan who are like, they're aunties and they're purveyors of etiquette, and they're, powerful elder women, and they wear leopard print, and it's associated with them. They wear other cat prints as well, but it's associated with them in a very positive way. Like these are your bold, outgoing, adventurous aunties, and they have wisdom to share.
Wow, that's so cool.
Isn't that great? Really amazing. And then, there's some great studies on leopard print that either just predated my publication. Like there was a whole exhibition that I didn't get to see before my book came out, but I was able to mention it. It's a joyous, playful, natural print.
Yeah.
It has all kinds of power.
Yeah.
And, historically it's been associated with power. In Africa, it's been associated with the most powerful, the most masculine, interestingly, people in given cultures.
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So that's a totally different association.
It does have a masculinity to it. Like I've always felt that way about leopard print is that even though there is this association with, this prowling feline,
Mhm.
there is like this strength and this dominance to it. And it's almost like it's incredibly beautiful, but it's not there to please or be pretty.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just there to stand out. And it's
Yeah.
interesting, because, it evolved in nature to help the cats blend in. Really.
Right.
And I love it when I do a leopard print event and people come out dressed in leopard print, or, people may come and they're not wearing leopard print, but they'll tell me about their mother or aunt or someone who was wearing leopard,
Mm,
and they have an old coat or an old dress or something of theirs, and it's really touching. And I think it's funny because, I live in the East Village and there's no shortage of people walking around in interesting clothes.
mm-hmm.
But if I go out and I'm wearing a leopard dress and leopard shoes and carrying a leopard bag and maybe wearing a leopard hat, every person I walk by has smiles or flinches, which is really funny. Like, what is that old lady doing? I was like, I'm having the time of my life. And also but so many people will go rawr when I walk by.
Wow.
And no matter how common leopard print becomes, it still has that impact. Like, these people will see me walk by and they'll, talk to me like I'm a cat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so entertaining. And I
Yeah.
love it. I love it.
It arouses the instinct.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
they're having fun, they're not commenting out of a desire to bother me. They're appreciating that I'm having a good time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and that's something about just all the threads of your work that I think is so beautiful is like, it's all so fun. It's all so fun. And something that you wrote, and this will be my last question, unless there's anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to be asked, but something you wrote that made me laugh so hard on Instagram once was you did like a little like ask me a question, and someone asked you, what would you tell, your 20-year-old self or something? And you said, fuck more rock stars.
I know I really should have.
And I wonder, like, that self that was looking at Life magazine and felt so pulled in by and felt, like you said, like in high school, like felt separate and othered. I wonder, is there anything that she might say to you and the woman that you've become and the career that you've created?
Boy, I mean, I don't know. Ask the question again. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. Like I think about my younger self who envisioned a life as a teacher or a nurse
Mm-hmm.
because those were the paths for a woman when I was coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about her and just the conformity of the life that I imagined for myself and the career that I have now and the work that I've created, it's like she would be like, wow, and like really excited and proud. And I'm wondering if just anything emerges for you when you reflect on just the life you've built and the career you've had.
Well, it's most of my joy now is because I moved to New York, which I
Mm,
was kind of afraid to do. And I had a lot of help. I had a lot of support from friends, Steve Trimboli, who's gone now, my friend Judith, who pushed me to write. And, I had a lot going on. I had a lot of support. But I didn't publish a book until I was 47. And
mm,
I started plotting to publish a book when I was, in high school. And I don't really know if I knew then what I was now. I think I had to go through it to get to where I am now. And, when I was young, especially when I was partying, there were all these people that were like, you're going to die young. I'm like, well, that's the idea. And but I sort of outlived a lot of living in my trauma. I outlived a lot of needing to be unique, which is a big sobriety thing, right? Where you can't be the piece of shit at the center of the universe, if you want to feel better. And you can't be the most interesting person in the room if you want to feel better. You've got to just be a person among people. And if you had told me then, because of the people that were around me, that one day you're going to be a person among your people and it will be the best thing that's ever happened to you, I don't think I would have believed it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think I would have thought that my people would agree with me on more things. They agree with me on everything. They don't. They don't. But yeah, just you're going to find your people.
Yeah.
Which I did not expect. But you can't find your people until you be as you can be. Otherwise, you keep attracting people who keep you trapped in whatever it is you feel trapped in.
Oh, I love that. That like risk of exposure is magnetism.
I think it's okay to tell people that it is dangerous. You just have to decide, do I want to live in this state forever, or do I want to take that risk?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it's like there's danger either way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say for me, it's been way more satisfying, whatever I went through to get there, to find my people and also to find myself. Like, I love to be alone. I used to not be able to stand being alone. I made my own skin crawl. And if you had ever told me that I would enjoy myself, that seems so implausible. But I'm really grateful for it now.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for this conversation and for just making that choice to take that risk of exposure and to be, let's see, I want to find the right words here. Let me just pause. To it's like that paradox of like being in devotion to this authentic spark within yourself, which also requires humility.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've impacted my life so deeply with the way that you model that and the lives of so many people. And so thank you so much for being here and for inspiring everyone on this episode.
Well, thank you for being inspiring and for encouraging me and just, being one of my people.
Thank you. And you are currently, or no, your show is not currently running. Is that right?
It'll be running again in the spring. Right now, I'm trying to finish some writing that I set aside while I was working on the show. I'm thinking about doing some of it on the Substack where I sort of talk through a chapter or something and see how people respond. We'll see.
Yeah. schoolofburlesque.com to learn more about Joe's classes and just the whole lineage of teachers that have expanded through over the years, and amazing variety of classes. You can also check out her books, The Burlesque Handbook and Fierce, A History of Leopard Print, and all new kinds of creations that are percolating, like her one-woman show, her writing, and definitely check out her Substack.
Yeah, and my personal website is joeweldon.com.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate your magic.
I appreciate yours.
If you enjoy what you hear on this podcast, you'll be besotted with what you discover in my brand new audio collection, In Celebration of Beauty. This 3-part series explores beauty as more than a pleasing aesthetic, beauty as a spiritual calling, a tool for healing, and an unexpected way to soothe our minds, nurture our bodies, awaken our spirit, and transform our world. Head to schoolofsensualliving.com/beautiful or click the link below this episode to download your complimentary collection today.